Over the past 9 years, there's been this prevailing narrative about people within the entertainment world, and I want to specifically focus on its music side as I run a music channel. You know it by heart, and I know it by heart. You've heard the phrase, keep politics out of music. There's a large chunk of people who get pissy when someone they listen to talks about what's going on in the world, whether it's racism or sexism or even just bad policy. When an artist becomes outspoken, suddenly there's this line crossed, even though many of the artists we're talking about were always political. For instance, people are mad Bruce Springsteen, the man who wrote Born in the USA, is political. I see it a lot from Republicans. Just recently, they were pissed that Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris even though Trump did literally nothing to get her vote. In fact, his use of AI-generated images was the worst possible move he could have made. A bunch of Republican talking heads, including Trump himself, started going on and on about how she's being used by the Democrats and is a threat to the next generation. It wasn't even the first time they tried to do this. These are the same people who were making conspiracy theories about the Super Bowl. Of course, the easy response to this phrase is that it's pure hypocrisy based on no historical basis. They love Kid Rock for boycotting a beer company because of an ad campaign with a trans person, while the man was selling the same beer at his own bar. They love Jason Aldean for a song about how people need to step up and be judge, jury, and executioner in their small towns, even over things that are not crimes. Remember that Aldean has never been from a small town. He's pretending to be. Hell, they love Oliver Anthony, a centrist who refuses to honor Trump, because of a song about welfare queens and government corruption. That song showed up during their primary debates. Republicans love political music, and they know that music has always been political. They're not dumb. They celebrate it and tout it in their culture wars, but when a left-wing person does it, then it's an issue. It's heavily partisan, and meant to steer discussion away from topics that they don't want to think about. And sure, some might say that it can stay in the lyrics, but when it's said outside of the music, that's where the line is crossed. But again, Ted Nugent and Kid Rock don't really fit that. The truth here is an ugly one. It's meant to try and stop a conversation from happening. At the very least, it is meant to delegitimize a political platform. That's why so many latch on to the excuse that the politics only divide the audience, and that they will suffer some sort of monetary punishment on behalf of a majority. First off, that's often not true. Springsteen isn't worrying about people leaving him. He's a billionaire. Trump said Swift will pay the price, but she just became a billionaire too. That said, it's that fear of the unknown that they want to be powerful. They want artists to feel like they can't express themselves genuinely because they could be on the wrong side. They want artists to second guess their own emotions out of a fear that they'll become has-beens overnight. Simply put, they want artists to bend the knee, to surrender. Now, I'm not a recording artist, but what I do is creative, and I feel like I have some responsibility, so let's not bend the knee. I want to do the one thing they don't want artists to do. I want to talk about Republicans, and boy do I have the receipts. We'll start with the presidential nominee. Trump is a convicted felon, guilty on 34 charges in the state of New York over improper recordings of payments to Michael Cohen for a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. His $354 million fraud verdict in New York bars him from doing business in the state. He was also found guilty of rape in the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit, and Carroll isn't the only one to accuse Trump of misconduct. This doesn't go into all of the other legal cases that Trump is in the hot seat for, from taking classified documents that he had no excuse to take, or leading an insurrection. He's in so many legal battles that the PAC funding his legal fees is $3 million in debt. He's literally on bail right now. The people around him are criminals too, let's not forget. Multiple people that Trump pardoned at the end of his presidency ended up getting into other criminal cases. Republicans who tried to overturn the election are pleading guilty as I write this. One of them, Rudy Giuliani, just learned that he has to give up his luxury goods and apartment over false statements regarding Georgia in the 2020 election. No matter how you cut it, Trump is the first president in United States history to be convicted of a felony, and he's surrounded himself with others who carried out criminal acts, a good amount of which were done to try and keep him in power. He does not believe in law, he's currently fighting it. That brings us to one of the biggest points. He's a wannabe dictator. He has allegedly stated multiple times while in office that he wanted to execute political opponents, and during his immunity case at the Supreme Court, his lawyers argued their assassinations would be covered by presidential immunity. Guess what the Supreme Court, including 3 judges he picked, ruled? That presidents are immune for official acts, something which they will decide. Political violence is a part of his campaign and his history in politics. In 2020, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer was the focus of a kidnapping attempt by far-right extremists, which Trump waved off saying that it wasn't a problem. In September of 2023, Trump mocked the husband of Nancy Pelosi after he was attacked with a hammer in his own home by a right-wing conspiracy theorist. A month later, he posted the supposed address of former President Barack Obama. Later that day, a man driving a truck full of guns was arrested nearby. March of 2024, he posted a video of a truck that depicted Joe Biden tied up in the back of it. Revenge has long been a part of his rhetoric, from prosecuting Google for supposedly going against him, to withholding crucial aid from counties and states who were perceived as fighting against him. You, at home, are also in the crosshairs of this. Criticize the Supreme Court or any justices, he would throw you in jail for it. Ever donate to a Democrat, he wants to throw you in jail as well. Want to protest his decisions? He'd use the military to squash you. In fact, he wanted to have protesters shot for using their First Amendment rights. Don't act like you'd be safe if he enacted his answer to crime, which is quite literally an hour of non-stop violence to get it out of the world. This revenge rhetoric is backed up by the people around him, like Trump's Secretary of Defense Kash Patel, future Secretary of Retribution Ivan Raiklin, as well as Steve Bannon. Michael Flynn said the gates of hell will open when Trump gets in. And no, this isn't about party lines. Trump has argued to purge Republicans who go against him like they did when his own cabinet thought about invoking the 25th Amendment. We're already seeing that Trump wants to reward loyalty. On his shortlist for Attorney General is Eileen Cannon, the judge who threw out the nuclear documents case in Florida in a ruling that legal scholars were baffled by. Trump has long connected himself not just to the language and movements of fascists, but actual fascists. Remember that time he had dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West? Or how about the time Trump shared a video talking about a unified Reich? What about the accusation that Trump complained that his generals weren't like Hitler's? There's so much smoke to the fire that the creator of Godwin's Law, the adage that all internet arguments will inevitably come to a bad faith Nazi comparison, said that Trump knows what he's doing. You know who else knows what he's doing? Nazis, who are showing up to his rallies and giving their support. Same with the fascist talking heads who directly tie his policy to Mussolini. Should I also bring up both Trump and Vance's praise of dictators like Viktor Orban, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin, as well as Vance's connections to anti-democratic names like Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel? Trump isn't the only one who thinks dictating the United States is a good idea. Arizona Senator Wendy Rogers tweeted out the lyrics of a Nazi rallying cry. Senate candidate Royce White said the wrong people won World War II. Conservative groups were the ones behind banning Anne Frank's diary and Maus from different libraries. Oh yeah, they sure like alluding to killing their opponents. Surely it's nothing deeper. Their oppressive ideas are backed by Project 2025, a policy proposal plan for Trump's first 100 days published by the notable Republican think tank the Heritage Foundation. It was written by hundreds of Trump workers. A main part of it is reissuing Schedule F on day one. It's an executive order that would destroy protections for tens of thousands of federal workers, creating a system where he can fire them for any perceived slights. This would create a government that is completely loyal to the president. This is not fantasy. Trump has already said that he'd fire Jack Smith over his investigations into his conduct. Schedule F would be the way to do so. Project 2025 is radical in many other ways though, with plans to shut down the Department of Education, privatize the NOAA, cut overtime pay, create a national anti-abortion coordinator to look over pregnancies across the country, and many other horrific things. There's so much in here that I can't summarize it all. Now Trump says he has nothing to do with it and that he knows nothing about it, but that's a lie. Co-author Russell Vought said that he's in discussion with Trump and that Trump endorsed his group, the Center for Renewing America. In fact, Vout was caught on camera saying he was working out executive orders for him. Trump was on a private flight with the president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, who compared abortions to the Holocaust and said that the country is heading to a revolution, one that may get bloody. Trump's vice president pick, J.D. Vance, wrote a foreword for his book. Trump introduced Project 2025 itself by saying it was our movement, and he's even campaigning alongside Peter Navarro, one of the people who helped build the document. He's owning it here, and the polling seems to indicate that voters believe it's his platform. Even Republicans do, partially because Trump's own policy is basically Project 2025. Roberts even said that Project 2025 and Trump overlap each other, and that Trump's only distancing himself from it because it's a liability. If you think the Constitution is going to save you, Trump mentioned terminating that, so sorry. Republican policy itself is full of danger, including policy that has and will kill people. Roe v. Wade was overturned by the conservative Supreme Court, which Trump empowered, and has led to multiple laws that heavily restrict, if not outright ban, women's bodily autonomy. Red states are so oppressive that women must give birth to kids they never asked for because they were raped. They have to deliver non-viable pregnancies. They have to carry a pregnancy which will kill them. Republicans have made traveling to certain states flat out dangerous. In fact, certain Republican states don't allow women to travel to get an abortion. Texas even put in a bounty hunter law so that people can get rewards for targeting women who want reproductive rights. It doesn't end at the states. They're going after IVF. Trump isn't ruling out a mifepristone ban, and J.D. Vance and the Heritage Foundation want to enforce the Comstock Act, a law which is already in place. They don't need to ban the medication, they can just use obscenity laws to heavily restrict it, and Trump can call the shots through Schedule F. And just to make it clear, they're for a national abortion ban, they just put it under a different title. Trump himself said, "Let's see what happens on the topic." Oh yeah, Republicans want a lot of data about women, and I really do mean a lot. In Virginia, they stopped a bill that would protect menstrual data from search warrants. Trump has said he's okay with states monitoring pregnant women. J.D. Vance is all for using medical records to go after women. It's not about their safety. In fact, Trump will mock you if you die because of these archaic laws. It's not even about being pro-life. We know that infant mortality rates have gone up because of these laws. More people are dying now. That's a fact. It really isn't about health. It's about control. Hence why Republicans are trying to end no-fault divorce, so that women will be stuck in abusive relationships. You want to know how far back they want to send women's rights? According to Representative Glenn Groffman, the 1960s. That's a time when women couldn't get an Ivy League education, or get a birth control pill, or even get a credit card. The 1960s is actually being generous. Project 2025 advisor and Trump White House Director John McEntee floated the idea of repealing the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. They don't just hate women, though. Trump has detailed plans to deport 15 to 20 million immigrants while praising Operation an Eisenhower-era policy which, from title alone, already sets the stage, considering it's a slur. Not only did this program designed to target illegal immigrants take U.S. citizens as part of the program, many people were left without food or water, with the consequence being death. 88 people died because of this policy. It was a humanitarian disaster. In comparison to Trump's plan, however, it's rookie numbers, with only 1.3 million deported. Again, Trump wants to do 15 to 20 million. This would require a militarization of the police force, which Trump himself has outlined. Not just the police either. He talked about using the National Guard to do the same. It would most likely require heavy amounts of surveillance, including surveillance into your own life. People around you will disappear under this, and that's not an exaggeration. 1 out of 25 households would be in danger here. And let's not beat around the bush on what Trump means. He himself said the deportations would be a bloody story. Republicans don't just mean illegal immigrants. They just mean immigrants. Stephen Miller, a man who's campaigning with Trump right now and repeating the words of the Klan, has called for mass denaturalization, or to remove the citizenship of thousands of immigrants. Trump himself confirmed this, saying that he'd remove their protected status. They're not the only ones chomping at the bit to do this. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, for example, is all in. Republicans are creating the justification, too. The lie about Haitians eating dogs is a direct attack on a local community meant to dehumanize them, getting close to the language of fascists who shouted blood libel. It's not the first time he's generalized millions of people as monsters. That's how he started. And let's not act like the mass deportations are merely about race either, because Trump's implied otherwise, such as when he said the US needs to keep communists and Marxists out of the country, while saying that there needs to be a new law for those with American citizenship. Considering these two terms have been used loosely since the Cold War to mean anyone with left-wing ideals, that should raise some red flags. And to make it clear, you will be paying for it. If you're not deported, your taxes are going to go to this, and it's going to be an unimaginable amount of money. To carry out just 1 million deportations, it would cost $20 billion. Massive, damaging changes to immigration aren't some far-off idea. Let's not forget the Muslim ban that Trump put in last time and how horrible that was. Republicans also hate the LGBTQ community, who is currently facing an onslaught of bigoted, if not genocidal, policy changes. Trump has stated that funding to trans-supportive schools would be cut day one of his presidency, and let's cut this off here. No, this isn't about children. It's about banning that identity entirely. In 2022, Ken Paxton from Texas tried to gather a list of trans people in the state. Texas continued this by making a database of people who tried to change their driver's license without any announcement or warning. Oh yeah, that makes it harder to vote. Anyways, states have opened up tip lines to report trans people in bathrooms. Odessa, Texas just became the first city to enact a full trans bathroom ban, marking a big shift from the already horrific laws we've seen. That's not it, however, because Republicans want to criminalize all trans folk. Project 2025 argues on page 5 that they want to ban pornography and persecute the people who make and distribute it, which in and of itself is an attempt to reclassify what constitutes free speech in America. Importantly, their definition of pornography is not based on sexual acts, it's based on what they in particular deem sexual. Under this, they could challenge movies and TV shows and music, whatever they wanted to, including entire demographics of people. They allude to multiple possible integrations, but their given example is that they want to classify trans people as pornographic and make them register as sex offenders. That's not even it. Republican commentators called for their eradication as they were made refugees in their own country because they refused to protect them. It's genocidal. But it isn't just about trans folk. Wisconsin Republicans allowed conversion therapy to continue and blocked a ban on it. In fact, the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has a long history of conversion therapy, as well as a number of other homophobic stances. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas wants to overrule Obergefell v. Hodges, which gave Americans the right to marry people of the same sex. Others like Ted Cruz are also keen on the same issue. Speaking of marriage, it's also worth noting that they're already floating the idea that interracial marriage should be left to the states. Let's try and rattle through a few more issues here. They're the ones pushing to destroy the separation of church and state by, for example, making the Ten Commandments a mandatory part of all Louisiana classrooms. Oklahoma went the same route, mandating that their Department of Education had to buy 55,000 Bibles for classrooms, but not just any Bibles, Trump's $60 Bibles. Do the math and you'll see that they would pay $3,300,000 tax dollars to get them, and all of this is currently in court. Remember that Oklahoma is one of the poorest states in the country. But let's not stop there. Russell Vought thinks that Republicans should consider banning mosques because America is a Christian nation. How about the environment? Trump's record shows how devastating he was. Over 100 different protections were rolled back during his presidency, and the number will be higher if you let him back in. God forbid we have another public health crisis, because last time that happened, Trump shat the bed, saying to inject bleach and that COVID cases would go down if we stopped testing for it. Don't forget that he wants to put RFK Jr., an anti-vax conspiracy theorist with a horrific record, in charge of public health. Let's talk about Trump's Supreme Court, the one that took down Roe and gave him immunity. those weren't the only things they did. Overturning Chevron, for example, limits the federal government's ability to even control itself, and instead relies on the courts to do the work. This is huge and radically changes how our government works. The idea of him appointing any more Supreme Court justices should scare you, especially considering two of his contenders are James Ho from the Fifth Circuit and Josh Hawley. How about foreign policy? It was recently revealed that the people around him had to act like adults and prevent a potential nuclear conflict with China in Trump's last month as president. Let's not act like Trump understands the weight of using nuclear weapons. He said that we should nuke hurricanes. Think about what would happen this time around, in a term where he wants to purge anyone who doesn't follow him completely. It's not even just about nukes. Trump has floated for years the idea of going to war with Mexican cartels without the permission of Mexico. He specifically wanted to send missiles into the country. Now he wants to send in troops. He wouldn't stop wars, he'd start them, and he'd make ongoing wars much worse. Gaza? Trump thinks that Netanyahu isn't doing enough bombing. He said Gaza would be better than Monaco if they rebuilt it the right way, and his own son-in-law is already eyeing up the land. Ukraine, he flat out said that they should give up land to Putin and that there should be a deal that helps both sides, because, the invader should get something too. It's only fair. It's certainly eyebrow-raising considering that Trump appears to be violating the Logan Act with multiple calls between him and Vladimir Putin, something which Elon Musk, one of Trump's big supporters, is also being accused of. And don't think for a second that he or Republicans care about the troops who fight these wars. When Vanessa Guillen, an army private who was killed by a fellow soldier in Fort Worth, had her funeral, do you know what Trump's response was? It doesn't cost $60,000 to bury a fucking Mexican. You know what else he said? That Americans who died serving the country were suckers and losers. He doesn't care that people die. He thinks they're dumb. Republicans don't even want to hear them. Parties in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina were challenging the overseas ballots of the military, veterans, and more. Let's talk about voting, because Republicans don't want you to. Vivek Ramaswamy argued that the voting age should be raised in the United States from 18 to 25. J.D. Vance once argued that Republicans should give parents more votes than other people. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton admitted that Trump would have lost Texas if they didn't suppress the vote. Don't forget, people are currently in jail for their attempts to squash the last election. States like Alabama and Georgia were just trying to change the election rules months before it all happened. Roger Stone, a man who Trump pardoned, has stated that he intends to send armed guards to mess with the election in Detroit, while admitting not only that they tried to overturn the last election, but they want to call a judge to overturn it this time. In Florida, police were going to the homes of people who signed an abortion rights ballot initiative, while DeSantis threatened TV stations which aired ads about it with prosecution. And when you do get your voice heard, they want to stop you. When voters have supported abortion rights in red states, Republicans have tried hard to throw out said initiatives. On top of all of this, Republicans have proven themselves to be completely unreliable and creepy freaks. Remember John McEntee? He would give fake money to homeless people so that they would get arrested if they used it. He was also accused of using a business account to try and flirt with teenagers, who understandably found his words uncomfortable. Trump ally Matt Gaetz was seen by multiple witnesses with a 17-year-old girl at a drug-fueled sex party. And that's not even his only story with underage women. Jim Jordan was accused of ignoring abuse that happened at Ohio State when he was a coach. One of Trump's advisors, Robert Morris, admitted to assaulting a girl in the 1980s, which started when the victim was 12. One of Trump's Supreme Court justices, Brett Kavanaugh, was in the hot seat with allegations of sexual misconduct, and the only reason it wasn't a bigger story was that, according to the FBI, Trump's White House intervened. That's on page 5. Speaking of creeps, how about Mark Robinson, a gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina whom Trump endorsed? He said he would buy slaves, he talked about his hate of Martin Luther King, and openly called himself a black Nazi as well as a pervert, telling stories about how he cheated on his wife and watched women taking showers. Let's really hammer home how disconnected from reality these people are. One of the top vice president contenders, Kristi Noem, shot a goat and the family dog because she was annoyed by them. You know, the National Rifle Association, the group which has paid Republicans millions of dollars over the years to fight against gun reform? New chief Doug Hamlin supposedly tortured and killed a pet cat. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts reportedly bragged that he killed his neighbor's dog with a shovel because it was barking too loud. Speaking of the Heritage Foundation, reporting from Real Clear Politics indicates that Project 2025 director Paul Dans didn't leave the project like was initially reported, but was fired after mistreating his coworkers, particularly women. And I have to bring this up. Republicans in Congress refused to fund cancer research because it would give Biden a win. They refused to fight fucking cancer because of politics. You wouldn't trust these people walking your dog, let alone running the country. I mean, they would probably kill your dog. And look, everything I just mentioned in this long, dedicated part of the video is a condensed version of what I had. I didn't include everything, including Trump's failing mental state, because I simply don't have the time. And I want to make it clear that this is not me merely disagreeing with policy. People's lives are at stake, whether it's trans folk or immigrants or women. People have and will die because of this policy, and if they survive, their rights will be taken away from them in ways we have never seen. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but I'm giving you every source I can to tell you this. Trump is a fascist. Republicans are a fascist party right now. Letting them into office once was already devastating. It will be worse the second time around, and you will be affected. There's a reason why pundits are calling this the most important election, because the stakes are unironically that high. In the presence of such blatant evil, you may feel demoralized and as if they've already won. Maybe it's as if this is what America is destined to be. Well, the issue is that it isn't, and if anything, all of this is a sign of weakness. And it's a weakness that they brought upon themselves. Polling for Project 2025 is incredibly bad. According to a poll from ABC in July, it was a negative 32 in favorability. NBC in September had even lower numbers, a total negative of 57. That's a real liability, and it explains why Trump tried to distance himself from it. You know what else is a liability? Being pro-life. 85% of the country believes abortion should be legal at least in some form, and that number only went up after the reversal of Roe v. Wade. We've even seen a lot of support in red states. It's not just a Democrat issue, and it's silly to believe otherwise. Another thing that's a liability is saying the current Supreme Court is great, like Trump did during the Harris debate. 7 out of 10 Americans believe that they're putting their ideology over fair rulings. Only 25% of the country have faith in the court itself, and these numbers are inseparable from Republicans. Trump led to the specific circumstances for such an opinion. One could argue that nobody changed the circumstances of the court like Trump did. Even topics Republicans are loud about, like trans folk, aren't powerhouse rallying cries. It's also worth mentioning that electorally speaking, there's some glaring warning signs. Winning the popular vote has not been a reality for Republicans in decades. The last time that happened was in 2004 with George Bush. That was 20 years ago. There are people voting now who were not alive when that happened. Trump made it to the White House not because he was universally loved, but instead the Electoral College, a system that a majority of Americans want to eliminate. We don't even have to go far back to see some interesting statistics. The 2022 midterms should have leaned heavily towards Republicans. When push came to shove, however, the Democrats overperformed, helped greatly by the reversal of Roe v. Wade months prior. They pushed for bad policy and then were shocked that bad policy doesn't motivate people. Whether they like it or not, times are changing, and in many ways they're losing grip. Each generation is becoming more progressive, and Gen Z will be making up a huge chunk of the electorate sooner than later. It's a crowd that they categorically refuse to side with. The reason they're leaning into fascism is not because it's an electoral winner in the general sense. It's because it's the one way they can maintain power for years to come. The retribution, the suppression, the destruction of safeguards. By doing this, Republicans can and will extend their powers in ways that are hard to divert. The writing on the wall is that their wet dreams are archaic, and the only way to go back is to force it by any means necessary, because otherwise they'd be dinosaurs. They are facing an existential threat, and this is their answer. So that leads us back to the main topic. The phrase, Keep politics out of music is not coming from a place of strength, it's fear. A musician, or any creative person, isn't going to change politics in a single piece, but they sure can influence how their fans think. They make them ask questions about the world they live in. They show us patterns and issues we may not think about. They shine a light on injustices that people commit, the inherent inequality that they fight for, the brutal fascism which they want to create and uphold. Republicans want to go unquestioned like all authoritarians do, but speaking out and doing the right thing throws a wrench in it. Making that resistance palatable to mass audiences is a bomb in the gears. It shows how illogical, fearful, and weak they truly are. That is why they want artists to bend the knee. Perhaps nobody shows this better than Taylor Swift. Earlier I mentioned how she endorsed Kamala Harris. That decision changed people's lives. Over 300,000 people visited vote.org after her announcement. We don't know the exact number of registrations, but it's probably in the thousands. That's thousands of new voters who could very well decide the election. Swift has influence over people, but the important thing is that this wasn't always the case. In 2016, she came under fire for not endorsing Clinton, and the silence was so deafening that Nazis took her as a symbol of their movement, calling her an Aryan goddess. Her thought process at the time was that Trump had weaponized the celebrity endorsement, but that's not the full story. She specifically said that she was told the best thing to do was keep politics out. She said to Vanity Fair, "As a country musician, I was always told it's better to stay out of politics. The Trump presidency forced me to lean in and educate myself. I found myself talking about government and the presidency and policy with my boyfriend, who supported me in speaking out. I started talking to my family and friends about politics and learning as much as I could about where I stand. I'm proud to have moved past fear and self-doubt and to endorse and support leadership that moves us beyond this divisive, heartbreaking moment in time." And because she spoke out and got over her self-doubt, she made new voters. She's fighting for what's right at a moment where democracy may die. And that is the point of this video. Don't fall for the bullshit that talking politics is some forbidden topic. It isn't, and it's never been, especially when the stakes are this high. Don't give in to nihilism or think that your vote doesn't matter. It absolutely does, both nationally and locally. If it didn't, Republicans wouldn't be trying to stop your vote. This election is on November 5th. Make sure that you, your friends, and your family get out there. Hell, canvass for candidates you like right now. You have power, and you can use it for good. And don't wait on other people to do it for you. You have the power here. It's that simple. And if this channel getting political upsets you, and you think I should go back to talking about music, well, listen closely. This isn't about policy, it's about people's lives. And if somehow after all of this that doesn't make sense to you, then I really don't care about your opinion.
I do not want to do 4 more years of resistance nonsense under Donald Trump, okay? Like, good God. Like, do we remember what it was like waking up every day and there was some shit going on?